Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung by me, Kindar. The Tiger writes. In Thai, the Tiger supervises. Today we are doing chapter 29. That was kind of the opposite of inspiring, Jekyll grumbled, rubbing his wrist. Around them, around them, people finally understood the silent glare the man was giving them meant they were to leave. I don't think that was meant to be, Kirina said. Is it my imagination, or did he sound like he hopes we aren't going to come back? He definitely doesn't want to see me again, Jekyll muttered, but shrugged at the expectant look Tibs gave him. Less people are easier to deal with, Tibs said, not that he knew what the fighter expected. What does it mean that he's going to have people guarding the dungeon? Absolutely nothing good, Jekyll growled. Should we go? Tibs asked. Jekyll looked around. Most of the people were gone, even Harry and the adventurers, except for those at the crack. Sure, but where? Our room? Is that where we want to go? The fighter asked. I mean, really want to go. He nodded to Tibbs. We need to go to our room first anyway, Tibbs said, and started walking. We have privacy there at least. Jekyll and Kirina caught up to him. Then, she asked, are we going to Mountain Sea, or do we want to do more research? That man said we can go anywhere. The capital has the best universities. We can find a scribe. If it's more difficult to breathe the higher we go, maybe there's a higher mountain we can go to. It isn't like Krosef has been everywhere in the world, right? Jekyll looked at her, smirking. And where are you hiding the kind of coins needed to pay one of those people? You think the electrum we have is going to be to even get them to look at us? Also, how long until they have answers? Seems to me the best way to do this is to go to Mountain Sea, try it. If it doesn't work, we detour to the capital another place with scribes, find out how much it costs, and while we're running the dungeons again, they can find the information. Did you know we'd get to leave? Tibbs asked. Is that why you had Krosef tell us about his home? Jekyll was silent until they almost reached a town. I thought it might happen. Safina's dad told me about dungeons graduating, how they close off to make changes. It made changes without closing before, Kirina said. It removed the marks on the triggers in the trap room, rearranged the rabbits in the warren room. Jekyll shrugged. Just telling you what he told me. What I found out of Hard Knuckles led me to think he wouldn't want people underfoot while he made the changes he needed. What I found out of Hard Knuckles led me to think he wouldn't want people underfoot while he made the changes he needs. Ah, while he made changes. How did you find out about that? Kirina asked. That was the first I heard things were going to change. I've been asking around, Jekyll said in a tone that made it clear he didn't want to discuss it. Then he sighed. Don't make it obvious, but look toward the tailor shop. There's a woman dressed in a green and black tunic. Kirina turned to look at where Jekyll had said, which earned her a city folks mumble from Jekyll, and she was glaring at him. It did mean that the woman in green and black looked It did mean that when the woman in green and black looked in their direction, Karina was no longer an indication they'd noticed her. Tibbs thought she'd been trying to be ignored. She's one of our Knuckles people. I had the so good fortune of coming across them when they first arrived. We got to talking and you fought, Tibbs said, remembering Jackal's bruises, his reluctance to talk about them. There might have been a disagreement about this or that, the fighter admitted. Why hadn't they killed him? Tibbs wondered. The rules were clear, and they were guards, or worked for Harry, so it sounded like he was in charge of that now. Had anyone been in charge of the adventurers before? So after Knuckles, helped us keep the shield, I asked around. You know, who was he? Why is he here? Where does he keep his ale? The usual stuff. He's taking over the town's law, well, guards. Town's law, well, guild's rules from old man Morbius. Seems he didn't do good enough of a job, and Hard Knuckles likes to set up the groundwork without interruption, which is what a bunch of runners without a dungeons to run would turn into real quick. I didn't think he'd give us the world, but I figured it would be easy. It would be a lot easier to go to Mountain Sea from wherever he shipped us to than here. You do a lot of sneaking around and gathering information, Karina said, for a fighter. Who said I snuck? Jekyll replied, offended. I casually strolled to them and asked if they wanted a drink. Got them nice and drunk, then asked questions. Very direct in my method. I leave the sneaking to Tibs. All right, we go to Mountain Sea. If that doesn't work, we stop at the capital and see what we can get there. That's a plan, Jekyll said as they entered the rooming house. Oh, my dear woman, he called to the woman behind the counter. We have a situation we need. You're leaving for a while, she said, then chuckled at Jekyll's stunned expression. You think you're the first to come back from that talk? Or that they wouldn't tell us what was happening before they did you? I needed to figure out how to arrange things. All right, Jekyll said. You know we'll be leaving. Yep, you have three options. Taking everything with us isn't an option, Karina said. You have two options. Number one, you pay for the room for the time you'll be away. We don't know how long that'll be, Jekyll said. Pay longer and you'll have it after you come back for however long that is left. If we guess short, the fighter asked. She grinned. Stuff goes in the street. Silver for 2 weeks seems like a lot, Karina said, just to keep our stuff here. Option two is you put your stuff in the chest, I store it, and I get to let the room to whoever needs it. You might not have the same room when you return, but you'll have one. You runners have priority. How much is that going to cost us? The woman took a large ledger out, looked through it, then turned it to the fighter, finger on a name. You paid 2 silvers 6 days ago. Agreed? Jekyll looked at Karina, as did Tibs. She sighed. I so need to teach you two how to read. She read the indicated line. Yes. Then they'll cover the chest for however long you stay away. Then they'll cover the chest however long you're away. 2 chests, Jekyll said. We aren't bringing our armor, and it's not going to fit with the rest of our stuff in one. We aren't? Jekyll shook his head. The cities see someone in armor that isn't guard's color, and they decide you're there to cause trouble. So they cause it to you first. And we'll be doing a lot of mountain walking. Crow already said it's going to be hard to breathe. We don't want the extra weight. He looked at her. 2 chests. All right, 2 chests. Bring them down when you leave. Anything in the room after that ends up on the street. Shouldn't we have our armor if they're going to cause us trouble? Tibs asked as they walked up the stairs. They won't cause us trouble if we aren't in it, Jekyll replied. City folks go by how you dressed. He looked at Karina. She sighed. All right, we kinda do. Think of it as gang marks, but prettier, Jekyll said, unlocking the room. Put on the good clothing Karina had you buy. When they see that, the people are going to see you as one of them, so they're going to be nice to you. Tibs crossed his arm once he was in the room and glared at the fighter. Karina, a little help here. Tibs is so street, I don't think he believes anyone can be nice to him. If it makes you feel better, she said, you can count on any merchant, no matter where you are in the world, on doing everything he can to swindle you. But no one will want to stab you. Probably, Jekyll asked. Did you want my help or not? I'm taking my knife, Tibs said. That is wise, Jekyll replied. Just don't reach for it too quickly if someone bothers you. Tibs took off his armor, feeling odd without its weight and no plan to go train with Alistair. What about our training? They work for the guild. They'll have been told, Karina said. Once they were in regular clothing, shirt, pants, and shoes, Karina's were pale blue, Tibs and grays, worn but not rags. Karina had insisted he had better clothing. He wasn't wearing the set she had. Karina had insisted he had better clothing. He wasn't wearing the set he had for training. It was too nice. And he didn't want it ruined. He added his knife sheath to his belt and felt stranger still for it being visible. But Jackal nodded his approval. Jackal's tunic was dark green and black. Like Tibs, it was worn, but it was made of sturdier fabric. Tibbs had seen him wear it before. Jekyll seemed fond of them, but he hadn't made the connection. They're the same color she had. That's not a question. That's a statement. Jekyll looked down on himself, cursed. It's a coincidence. I've had this for years. I'm not getting rid of them just because Knuckles is bringing people over. Carino chuckled as Tibbs gawked at the anger the observation created. You're going to want to keep them stored once you come back, she said, unless you want everyone to think you're part of the new guard. Are we ready? Jekyll snapped. Everything's in the chests. Karina said, watching the fighter. I doubt they did it on purpose to annoy you. Jekyll rolled his eyes, grabbing a chest and muttering something Tibbs didn't entirely make out. Knuckles going out of his way to make his life miserable as he exited the room. Okay. I think there's some, so yeah, this is too precise. Something about Knuckles and making his life miserable as he exited the room. And that's not capitalized. He looked at Karina, taking the handle of one of the chests. She took the other one with a shrug. Instead of heading to the platform, Jackal headed for the inn, and they followed him. Inside was busy, with runners happily drinking and eating. Crow! Jekyll called to the server, returning to the kitchen. What's going on? Korsep asked. It's like they found out the dungeon was giving free ale or something. They can't stop talking about not having to do runs and about places they're going to see. The dungeon's closed for a while. The dungeon's closed while it's graduating, Jekyll said, and the new security guy is kicking us out until we're done. He showed the bracelet. He's going to tell us when it's time to come back. We're heading to Mountain Sea and... Tibbs cursed under his breath at the dark expression that came over the server's face, and he pulled Karina with him as he walked away. He saw Jackal turn to follow them, but Krosef grabbed his arm. Shouldn't we wait for him? They're going to have a them thing. And we don't want to be around for it. Outside, he leaned against the wall by the door. Karina took the other side. She opened her mouth as the dining room fell silent. Then Krosev's voice rose in level, not enough to be understood, but enough to carry the anger. Oh, Karina said, that kind of them thing. Tibbs nodded, noticing Bardic look in his direction before entering the alley. He headed toward it, and Karina fell in step before him. Step with him. I think one of us should stay and wait for Jackal to be done, he said. Where are you heading? I want to see Alistair. I want to see if Alistair's here. He has exercises he can give me to do while I'm with my essence. We're going on vacation and you want to bring lessons with you? He shrugged. I can use all the lessons I can get if I want to do more than this. He formed a pool of water in his palm. You can do more than that, she replied, and what you can do with just that is impressive enough. With just that is impressive enough. Not compared to what others do, he said, trying to make his tone morose. All right. If we're not here when you're done, we'll be at the platform. There's probably going to be a line anyway, since everyone's looking to leave. She headed back to the inn. Bardic wasn't in the alley, and on the other side was a tavern, one of the newer ones that didn't get a lot of people yet. He entered. Few merchants were at a table discussing something. Someone was asleep, head on the bar, and Bardic was at the other end, talking with, of all people, Old Man Walrus. This wasn't his tavern, or at least Tibs didn't think it was. Did the man own both? Walrus laughed at something Bardic said as Tibs approached. Bardic took a tankard from the counter and handed it to Tibs without looking at in his direction. I hear congratulations are in order. You get to leave town. Tibs took it, sipped from it. Walrus's ale was better. And what Krosef brought them was better still. The dungeons graduated, so we can visit places. Graduating. So we can visit places. He showed the bracelet and watched Bardic's reaction, or the lack thereof. Heard you're going to Mountainsea. Tibs didn't ask how Bardic knew. He was a rogue and he could go places Tibs couldn't. The news surprised Walrus, so however friendly they were, Bardic didn't tell him everything. Why have Tibs put opals in the man's pocket if they were friends? You heard about the Cliffside General Gatherer? Tibs asked. It's in the Low Rock district. I've never been there, Tibs replied, trying to make his tone carry the idiot he didn't want to voice aloud. Bardic grinned. I thought the friend of a friend who told you about the city might have mentioned it. It's popular. Run by a man called Charles. You looked at Tib. Charles of Godfroy? Taller than you, but then everyone is, aren't they? Dwarf might not be, Walrus said. That's not muddy the water, Bardic replied. He's stocky, balding, green eyes, but the normal kind. You've seen those before, right? Tibs nodded. You should visit him. He looked pensive. Ask to try some sea drops. It's a candy. Be sure to tell him I recommended that you visit him when you do. That way he won't charge you for that first one. He grinned. But watch out for the others. He's a shark of a merchant. Bardic finished his ale and put the tankard on the counter. Told you there's nothing to worry about here. With that as ale, you'll only see the runt of the workforce and leave smokers. You have your hands on the right kind of ale. He sells it for a lot cheaper than I do. So Walrus didn't own this place. Because he has to. I wouldn't pay what you charge for this. Would you, Tibs? Tibs shrugged. It wasn't like he bought ale at Walrus's tavern. It wasn't like he'd buy. Wasn't like he'd buy ale at Walrus's tavern. You should head out, Bardic said. You wouldn't want to delay your visit. Mountainsea's amazing this time of the year. Tibs finished his ale and headed back to the inn where Carina was still waiting. How did talking to your teacher go? He isn't here. He had no idea if Alistair was or not, but he'd mentioned being busy and having done other duties, so he was confident. How do I do it? Jekyll said, stepping out of the inn. He looked at the two of them. How do I always manage to say the wrong things with him? You don't, Tibs said. He'd seen the two of them in corner tables, talking quietly, Krosef laughing and leaning close to the fighter. He's city in your street, Carina said. There's going to be some misunderstanding. You need to give him some leeway. What about me getting leeway? Jekyll asked. Carina walked around him, looking him over. Did he slap you, kick you, punch you, knee? What? He'd never do that. Jekyll paused. Well, not to me. Krosef had no problem decking customers who got too handsy with him or another of the servers. For someone who said he didn't do adventures, he certainly knew how to fight. Then he's giving you ample leeway, Carina answers. Since you aren't running as fast as you can for the platform, what are we doing? He's going to be a few minutes. He got his dad to give him 2 days off. It's going to delay us, Carina pointed out. Jekyll shrugged. It's not like 2 days are going to make a difference, and it's going to make Crow happy. He hasn't been there since arriving on account of that they have to pave to use the platform. Won't he have to now? Jekyll shook his head. One of the attendants owes me a favor. This is a good way to collect. Don't tell Crow he thinks his dad is paying. He wouldn't? Jekyll rubbed his face. He would if he could afford it. The competition from all the taverns is making it tough to make it's making it tough to make profits. The guilds made sure no one who came here could leave easily, not just us. Well, why? Karina asked. From what I understand, as the dungeon becomes stronger, more and more people will come to train in it. The town will grow larger, the more profits there will be to. The town will grow larger, the more profits there will be to have. Why would anyone want to leave such an opportunity? I'm asking that exact question, Jekyll replied, looking around as if he could peer into a building and see the answer. I'm ready, Khrushchev said, rushing out of the inn. Come on, we have to go. He grabbed Jekyll by the hand and pulled him along. Karina watched him. Tibs got the amused expression on Jekyll sent his way. Wouldn't it be great to have that too? She asked. Tib watched his friend as Jekyll pulled Khrushchev to slow, then walk with him, the two of them leaning toward another. He shook his head. He wouldn't inflict the kind of pain that came with being a runner on anyone, ever. She looked at him, but didn't comment. They hurried to join the two and took place in the long line, slowly moving toward the platform. They hurried to join the two as they took place in the long line. In the long line, yeah, there's no comma here. In the long line, slowly moving towards the platform. Khrushchev talked about all the places he was going to show them, and the few he was going to take only Jekyll to. Jekyll looked amused. Tibs distracted himself by watching the people around them, mostly runners, with a few merchants. He frowned as the man before them played with his bracelet, the light reflecting on the yellow gem, refracting through it. Tibs moved his so it was in the sunlight and compared them. This should be interesting, he thought, only considering pointing him out to an adventurer for a few seconds. No, he wanted. You know what? He only considered pointing him out to an adventurer for a few seconds. No, he wanted to see what would happen when he tried it. They moved forward, and twice he thought the men would leave the lineup as adventurers passed by. Instead, he covered the bracelet until they were out of sight. When his turn came, he stepped onto the platform. When his turn came and he stepped onto the platform. Then his turn came and he stepped onto the platform. He didn't even get to show it. Wow. He didn't even get to show it that the attendant No, okay. He didn't even get to show it that the attendant began arguing with him. No, Jekyll grumbled. Not now. Tibs looked at his friend only long enough to catch his worried expression, then watched the altercation on the platform. It's okay, Jekyll, Khrushchev said. A little delay won't be a problem. Is he trying to pass a fake bracelet? Kirina asked. What bracelet? Khrushchev asked. The man on the platform grabbed the attendant and pulled him to the center of the platform. Pulled him to the center, knife in his other hand. Oh, mercy, Khrushchev exclaimed. There's always someone trying to skirt the rules, Karina said, shaking her hand. Normally it's us, Tibs replied and got a snortle out of her. Khrushchev looked at him, horrified. Jekyll looked even more worried. No, don't. The knife went up to the attendant's throat as another stepped forward. Jekyll let go of Cross's hand and stepped toward the platform. The man with the knife fell back, black arrow in his shoulder. The attendant he'd held staggered forward, hand over his neck, blood seeping between the fingers. Tibs grabbed Jekyll's arm as the fighter took another step, and before Jekyll wrenched his hand out, Tibs grabbed Jekyll's arm as the fighter took another step, and before Jekyll wrenched his hand out, one of the other attendants had a bottle to the man's lip and had him draining the content. Jekyll relaxed, then tensed as a man in green and black carrying a bow walked. Green and black. Carrying a bow walked by them. He cursed, and the man glanced in their direction, staggered, then regained his footing. When Tibs looked at Jackal, his friend was looking back at him, worried. The archer had recognized Jackal, and he was afraid Tibs would say something about it. Tibs shook his head. Whatever this was, whatever Jackal's connection to Hard Knuckles, or the people in green and black, his friend would tell him when it was time. Karen and Khrushchev were looking at the platform, the attendant who was relaxing. The attendant who was calming down. The archer pulled the man with the arrow in his shoulder up, not being gentle about it, making him cry out, then motioned to the injured attendant to follow. As they stepped off the platform, Jackal let out a loud whistle, and both the attendant and the archer looked in his direction. The archer began moving, not looking happy, but the attendant spoke softly and approached them while the archer continued. "Are you okay?" Jekyll asked. The side of the attendant's neck and gold robe was covered with blood, but the wound was gone. "Thank you for your concern, but I am well. This isn't a rare occurrence at dungeons, so we come prepared. I just need to go report what happened, if you'll forgive me. Before you go, considering what just happened," he indicated a platform where people were cleaning the blood. "Not attendants," Tibs noted. "I'd be eternally grateful if you could make sure we're cleared and you tell your friends over there. The four of us are traveling together. We're going to Mundansea. I'm taking them to visit. I'm taking them home for a visit," Khrushchev said, and Jekyll winced a little. The attendant looked them over. "Your wrist?" They showed them, Khrushchev showing his bare one. My father paid for my passage," he said. "I'm returning in 2 days." "Yeah, he did," Jekyll said. "Everything's dealt with. As I said, I just want to avoid a misunderstanding. Since everyone will be a little edgy, I'll be grateful." "Gratitude is a good thing to have," the attendant said, taking a coin that showed multiple colors in the sunlight. "Since you'll be returning, present this to the attendant when it's time." He handed it to Khrushchev. "And them?" he asked, taking it. "Their bracelet are their key to returning. Now, you'll have to forgive me. I have a report and watch." "A what?" I have to report and watch." The attendant motioned them on the platform, and Tibs pulled Jekyll behind the other two. "You owe him now?" he whispered. His friend nodded, then looked at Khrushchev, bouncing in place, motioning for them to hurry. Totally worth it. And this concludes chapter 29 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying this, please subscribe and hit the bell. Hit the thumbs up. Share with your friends. If you want to read the story, it is on Royal Road. The link is in the notes, as is the link for my Patreon, should you want to support me. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.